Hey, good Thursday, everybody. A lot of people know the name Frank Ogawa, Oakland Councilmember Frank Ogawa. But you know Frank Ogawa because Oakland City Hall Plaza was named after Frank Ogawa. So just about a couple of days ago, I saw Oakland District 4, current Oakland District 4 Councilmember Janani Rachmanandran's vlog on Instagram talking about Oakland City Hall and that it is named for Frank Ogawa. But she didn't know Frank Ogawa. I knew Frank Ogawa. And I just happened to see a post from someone, a dear friend of mine, who's since moved to Mexico, who worked for the city of Oakland in some very legendary roles, who wrote a very nice piece about Frank Ogawa because she really knew Frank. And I'm talking about Becky Taylor. And so this photograph, she posted it to Facebook from his memorial and celebration. And this is the, as you can see, the agenda. And Elihu was there because Elihu knew Frank very well, good friend, and others. There's Henry Gardner, Henry Chang, who was also an outstanding at-large council member for Oakland, and just a great person. The late George Vukasin, great friend of mine. Love George. There's also Pamela Berta, who I don't know, and Dick Spies, who is Oakland District 4 council member and vice mayor, and another friend of mine and a great person, a great man of Oakland who, if you visit the Chabot Space and Science Center in Oakland Hills, that's there because of the work of Dick Spies. That's his lasting legacy. It's a great people. And this is something Frank wrote to Becky. Dear Becky, congratulations on being appointed by Mayor Harris as our city's protocol officer. I agree with the mayor that you are the right person to greet our international visitors when they come to visit our wonderful city. I know you will do an excellent job. Please keep in touch. And keep that in mind, as we don't have a protocol officer anymore. And Becky did a fantastic job. Ask yourself, who is responsible for protocol, how we greet international visitors, particularly heads of state? What's the pattern? What's the protocol? What's the process that we use? Think about that. Okay? Think about that. We don't have that today. All right? It's, hey, that's something the mayor could do in the city. We don't have it. This one was, it says, Dear Becky, big thanks a million. What a big surprise. I went to fax Sheila Young yesterday to tell her I was sorry that I was at a council meeting and unable to attend her party at Scott's. However, hers was a surprise too, and I didn't want to spoil it. You were so kind and thoughtful to give me a birthday celebration. All the best to you, Frank. That says a lot for Becky, but it says a lot for Frank. And people wrote back each other thank yous those days. Okay? Postcards from Frank that I'm not going to try to read because of the cursive. And then, Dear Becky Taylor, thank you very much for the wonderful job you did in organizing Frank's memorial service at the Oakland Museum. You are so kind and thoughtful. Also, your cards from overseas were great. All the best to you, Grace Ogawa, Frank's wife. And so Becky writes something about Frank that should be known and seen when I enlarge this is long, okay? So I'm going to read it to you. I'm not going to ask you to read it, but it's worth consuming. It goes like this. A major reason for my recent return trip to Oakland, Becky writes, was to finally clear out my storage unit, largely consisting of forever stuff. When I returned to my home in Mexico, I brought back a small suitcase of feel-good folders containing special cards and letters I've collected over the years. I hadn't looked at these in years until now. I got a lump in my throat looking through my Frank Ogawa folder. I found numerous letters and handwritten notes from Frank, mostly thank yous spanning about 15 years, including those in his public memorial service program of July 13th, 1994. That was my second year as Mount Clarion columnist. And she writes, a very hot day with about 1,000 guests, including a Japanese delegation, seated in rows in the Oakland Museum garden 31 years ago. Wow. Frank was a long-time Oakland City Councilman, beloved by many, this is true, both in Oakland and our Japanese sister city of Fukuoka, population 5 million, one that he helped to establish in 1962. I met Frank long after that, in 1978, when I worked for Mayor Lionel Wilson as his executive secretary, aka traffic director. Frank was well known for his kindness, gentleness, and generous nature, and great sense of humor, typically self-effacing. The most important thing to know about Frank was that he, his wife Grace, and her father were interned during World War II in one of the many concentration camps in the United States, in Topaz, Utah. There, they lost their 3-year-old daughter, Nancy, who'd fallen ill with fever one night, and Frank ran with her in his arms in a muddy rainstorm to the large compound's infirmary. She died on the way. Heartbroken, in many ways, the Ogawas returned to the East Bay after the war. Excuse me. This is hard. After the war. Excuse me. I'll try that again here. This is a little hard. Okay. They lost their 3-year-old daughter, Nancy, who'd fallen ill with fever one night, and Frank ran with her in his arms in a muddy rainstorm to the large compound's infirmary. She died on the way. Heartbroken in many ways, the Ogawas returned to the East Bay after the war, and Frank worked as a gardener for the wealthy in Oakland, Piedmont. He once told me, I had to knock on many back doors in my customers' homes because they didn't want their neighbors to see if they had a Japanese gardener. He told me this without a trace of malice in his voice. Thanks to unbridled and unconstitutional racism practices by the United States government against these loyal and hardworking citizens, they were reviled for years after the end of the war. Like many Japanese Americans, Frank did everything he could to prove his American loyalty, and he was finally rewarded for his community volunteerism by the then Republican mayor and council with an appointment to the Oakland Parks Advisory Board. The rest, as they say, is history. Frank was reelected many times up until his passing in 1994. One year, I was lucky enough to chair his re-election campaign's finance committee. It was the easiest campaign volunteer job I ever held. People would practically throw money into his campaign coffers, and he would sing my praises as if I had any significant part in raising bags of money for him. But that was Frank, always giving the other guy or gal credit that he deserved, he or she. Thanks to Frank, I visited Oakland's Japanese sister city of Fukuoka over 10 times and still have many friends that there. I am a dedicated Japanophile. Yesterday, I started listening to Rachel Maddow's 6-part podcast, quote, Burn Order, unquote, about the origins and aftermath of the World War II Japanese-American concentration camps that confined 120,000 mostly American citizens for 3 years without any due process. The only positive outcome, many years later, 1988, she guesses, was when Frank picked me up in his new Toyota sedan that he brought from his congressionally approved reparations money, I think $20,000. I know that Frank would be horrified to know that history may be repeating itself today. I could not agree more. And also the fact that they receive reparations also calls into question, why haven't African Americans received reparations? And in particular, those African Americans who have directly suffered from, and traceably suffered from slavery. But I digress. The point of all this is that Frank Ogawa was nice to people. He made sure he used the systems of the time to communicate his gratitude. It's not something you see from Oakland Council members today. You have to understand that it doesn't matter what time we're talking about, the past or how far back or the present. People still want to be acknowledged. And Frank Ogawa was a master at that. I met Frank twice. In 1988, the first time. Always nice. That smile you saw on him was literally painted on him. I can't remember, well, I can remember one time, but I was going to say, most of the time, Frank always had that smile. I can remember one time he didn't. And I think the one time that he didn't was when someone accused him of racism. And it really got to him because he, like all of us in Oakland, know all kinds of different people. And we always recognize each other for who we are, not just our names, but also our backgrounds, our ethnic backgrounds and everything else. In other words, we're not going to say, oh, we don't see color. We do see color. And the reason why we see color is because it's part of your story. And Frank acknowledged that for everybody. Now, Frank may have made decisions that others didn't agree with from a class standpoint, but some of the people who agreed with him were also black. So if you were to call Frank racist on those matters, then you would have to call the black persons that sided with him the same thing as well. And, then things become really complicated. You start delving into class issues, which I think is really the Oakland story. The reason why Frank Ogawa has his name on the plaza is because Frank Ogawa was a wonderful person. He was a nice person to everybody. And if you ever had the opportunity to meet him even once, you wouldn't have anything bad to say about him. So that's the story, all right? That's the story. Thanks.